faculty development program on literary theory and criticism. In this 1 week long faculty development program, we are covering many schools of literary theory such as Marxism, post-structuralism, post-colonialism, feminism, reader response theory, psychoanalysis, cultural theory, eco-criticism, and digital humanities. Many distinguished speakers like Dr. Milind Malshe, Dr. Ashok Thorat, Dr. Rahul Pungalia, Dr. Anand Kulkarni, Dr. Bharti Harishankar, Dr. Priya Nair, Dr. G.V. Naresh, Dr. Mustajib Khan, Dr. Kamlakar Bhatt, and our alumnus, Dr. Anil Sonone, have accepted to conduct sessions in this FDP. On this occasion, as a head of the department, it is my duty to acquaint you with the tradition of the department. The Department of English was instituted in the year 1969 with the inception of the college. Initially, we had only graduate courses offering English at general and special level. With the increasing demand from the student community, we started post-graduation in English in 1991. In order to enrich communication skills of our students, we introduced UGC-sponsored functional English course in 1994. We are still running this course successfully. In the year 2009, the department established Research Center in English. So far, 18 students or 18 research scholars have received their PhD degree from this research center. At present, 27 students are pursuing their PhD degree from our center. We have 12 research guides associated with the research center. The Department of English also offers certificate courses in foreign languages such as Japanese, German, and French. The department also has a well-equipped language lab to train students in English phonology. The Department of English has always strived for excellence and quality. Professor Sant, Dr. Vilas Saranke, Sahitya Academy Award-winning translator, Dr. B.S. Walke, former chairman, BOS in English of Savitribai Philip University, Dr. A.D. Bandal, a film critic, Dr. Uddhav Asturkar, a famous sitar player, and Professor Vinaya Kelkar were the stalwarts in the field of English who headed this department prior to me. With the guidance of our principal and keeping the standards set by these stalwarts in mind, we as a team are striving hard to maintain the name and fame of the department. I hope that this FDP will enrich the knowledge of all the participants and benefit them in their career. Considering the importance of the theme in the present situation, the response of the participants to the FDP has been overwhelming. 950 teachers, research scholars, and students have registered for this FDP. Thank you very much for being part of this FDP. Once again, I thank Principal Dr. V.B. Gaikwad sir and Dr. Milind Malshe sir for being the chief guest and keynote speaker respectively. At the end, I express my heartfelt thanks to all my friends, colleagues, office staff, and every single person who supported us in organizing this program. Thank you very much. Over to you, Tushar Patil sir.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Sharath, for putting the department in a very short span of time. And the number of the participants, that is 343 so far, indicates the nature and the urgency of such faculty development program on literary theory and criticism. Thank you very much. Friends, KTHM has become one of the outstanding colleges. It is because National Accreditation and Assessment Council has accredited our KTHM college with A++ grade having 3.79 CGPA. It has brought KTHM on the top in the list of the accredited colleges in Maharashtra and at number 4 in the entire country. Our college has been identified as one of the best colleges from Savitribai Phule Pune University. It has a status of College of Potentials for Excellence by University Grants Commission, New Delhi. We are one of the few recipient colleges with UGC Stride, DBT FIST, DST Star, Paramarsh, Community College, and other novel initiatives of University Grants Commission and the Government of India. The man who is behind all this glory, former Director of Board of Colleges and University Development of Savitribai Phule Pune University, currently a member of Management Council of the same, a veteran researcher having plenty of patents to his credit. A continuous and voracious reader is none other than a beloved principal of our college, Principal Dr. V.B. Gaikwad sir. Now I request him to inaugurate this 6-day online faculty development program. Principal Dr. V.B. Gaikwad sir.
Thank you, Dr. Tushar Patil. At the very outset, I welcome Honorable Professor Dr. Milind Malshe, who is the keynote speaker of this online faculty development program on literary theory and criticism. Dr. N.D. Gaikwad, IQAC coordinator, Dr. Praveen Nalawade, Stride in charge, Professor Sharad Binnor, Head Department of English, the entire organizing team, coordinator of this FDP, Dr. Tushar Patil, and dear participant friends. Although I am a man of chemistry, literary theory and criticism always attracts me to know more about it. Reading is my cup of tea. I like reading very divergent books. I like reading travelogue, autobiography, life sketch, and also science fiction. For me, reading a literary work in the light of literary criticism seems to be more fruitful activity. It's because literary criticism seems the literary work from the perspective like social aspect, economy, psychology, history, philosophy, and even science. For this, I congratulate the Department of English for designing this faculty development program on such a crucial and innovative topic. Friends, now let me present KTHM College in brief. Actually, Dr. Tushar Patil has already explained about our college, but within 1 or 2 minutes, I would like to explain about KTHM College. KTHM College was established in 1969, which is affiliated to the Savitribai Phule Pune University and situated on the bank of Sacred River Godavari, has witnessed tremendous administrative and academic transformation during the span of last 52 years. KTHM College has seen consistent growth in quality and quantity from the year of establishment to the present day. As Tushar Patil already explained about the college, our college has the status of colleges with potential for excellence. Right now, the third phase is going on. Under this particular scheme of the University Grant Commission, we received more than 10 crore along with the other scheme, that is the basic scientific research. We also received the grant under the scheme of DST fees, DBT Star. Then we have already established the institution innovation cell under the scheme of the Institution Innovation Council, sanctioned by the previous name, that is the MHRD. We also received the grant under the scheme of the Paramarsh. Then we received the grant under the scheme of the Unnat Bharat Abhiyan from the Niti Aayog. And as Dr. Tushar Patil already explained about the NAC status, the year 2017 has added one more shining feather in KTHM's crown, when we have been accredited with A++ grade with 3.79 cumulative grade point average. We have secured the first place among all the colleges in Maharashtra and fourth across the country. Last year, in the last academic year, KTHM College became one of the few recipient colleges getting the status of STRIDE, that is scheme of the transdisciplinary research for India's developing economy. The stride offers us scope to widen our horizon in our academic efforts. Under this particular scheme, we have introduced the 11 distinguished courses which are already approved by the Savitribai Phule Pune University. Now, only the curriculum part, the curricular part is not important, but along with that, we have already started the more number of the add-on courses, audit courses, elective courses, and that number is more than 50, which means the student always thinking about this, the different types of the elective audit courses, because only the curriculum is not important, but along with that, student always try to acquire the different skill through the different types of the certificate, diploma, and advanced diploma courses, which are beneficial for their placement as well as the entrepreneurship. English department has organized this faculty development program under the scheme of STRIDE. We have already started some of the innovative research project under this particular scheme. All these different types of the project are socially relevant, locally need-based, nationally important, and globally competent. This STRIDE scheme is a very much supportive for basic, applied, and transformational action research for India's developing economy to attain the sustainable development goals, which will facilitate overall human development. University Grant Commission has already given the different types of the guideline for this STRIDE scheme, but specifically the UGC has given the two main objectives of the STRIDE. The first objective is to identify young talent, strengthen the research culture, build capacity, promote innovation, and support transdisciplinary research relevant to the national development, and to enhance the overall well-being of the society. Second objective is to find high-impact national network projects in the identified thrust area in humanities, human science, and Indian knowledge system. English department organized this lecture series in the line of the objective of STRIDE, which will remain beneficial for all the different stakeholders. At last, once again, I welcome you all the delegates on behalf of Maratha Vidya Prasarak Samaj and KTHM College Nasik. Before conclude my speech, I announce that this online faculty development program is inaugurated. I wish you all a very successful journey during these 6 days. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
We always experience this very difficult task to present this enormous history of KTHM College within such a little span of time. But you always make it possible with your very select words. Thank you. Thank you so much. Friends, now it is the time to listen to the stalwart in literary circle, a versatile personality, Professor Dr. Milind Malshe. Retired in 2017 as a professor of English from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Bombay, Professor Dr. Milind Malshe has formulated and taught on art and aesthetics and on appreciation of music at IIT Bombay at the undergraduate and doctoral levels. Dr. Milind Malshe successfully guided 19 doctoral students in different areas of humanities and performing arts. Sir has published numerous books in Marathi and English and on linguistics, literary theory, aesthetics, and research methodology for the performing arts. Sir has presented research papers on literary theory and performing arts at international level in renowned universities in Denmark, Greece, Finland, UK, USA, and Canada. Having published numerous articles in major research journals, Professor Dr. Milind Malshe sir has translated R.G. Collingwood's Principles of Art and Noam Chomsky's Rules and Representations into Marathi. trained as a vocalist for more than 20 years under the guidance of renowned gurus of the Jaipur Gharana. Dr. Malshe is active in concerts and lecture demonstrations in India, USA, and Canada. A man whose personality is the confluence of knowledge and art is Professor Dr. Milind Malshe. I request him for his full-length keynote address. Professor Dr. Milind Malshe, sir.
Hello, am I visible and audible?
You are very well visible and audible, sir. Please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tushar Patil. And thank you for the introduction in which you have said many things which I'm not going to take very literally. Okay, let them be there in my biodata. I have joined the 70 plus club very recently. So you can, if I say certain things which don't appeal to you, maybe you can treat me as a person from some previous age and some previous generation. He is going to say things like that. But let me first of all thank you all, the organizers and the people who are going to attend this. It's an extremely happy occasion for me to, to give the first lecture, the whatever you call it, inaugural or whatever. The college is extremely prestigious, as we all know it, KTHM College for short, in Nasik. I've been to this college, and in fact, I would have loved to come personally to the college. As we all know, internet sessions are extremely inadequate, but in the present circumstances, that's all we can do. But I'll wait for your invitation after the pandemic is over. I have been previously to this college and I have enjoyed participating in seminars and so on. The English department is very familiar to me, and I particularly thank the head of the department, Professor Dr. Sharad Binor, who is a friend to me. I have been coming to Nasik off and on for various purposes, to participate and also to motivate people to learn music, classical, Indian classical, Hindustani music, Raga Sangeet. So I'm familiar with the college and its functioning. I think it's a very, very prestigious college, and I thank you all. I also congratulate you for having organized this particular faculty development program on literary theory and criticism. And as you rightly said, the number of participants shows how important this topic is to teachers of English, teachers of languages, teachers of humanities, and so on. So I really congratulate you. And please remember that the theories which Dr. Sharad Binor mentioned as topics which are going to be covered: Marxism, post-structuralism, post-colonialism, feminism, cultural studies, etc., eco-criticism, psychoanalysis, and digital humanities. They are not confined to literary studies. They are topics which are relevant to all the students and teachers of humanities and social sciences. In IIT, there is a combined department of humanities and social sciences. Philosophy, sociology, psychology, economics, English with linguistics and literary studies, and of course, sociology, psychology, and now we are going to add history, history and political science. So these will give a spatial impetus to various kinds of theoretical formulations. It's a wonderful range of topics. And Professor Ashok Joshi from Goa, he retired from Goa. He is now settled in Pune. He and I wrote a book in Marathi called Adhunik Samiksha Siddhant, where many of these have been in detail discussed in Marathi. It has been published by Mauz Prakashan Gruha. First edition came up in 2007. The only topic missing from your list is digital humanities, which has emerged as a major theme in humanities and social sciences in the last 10 years or so. When we were writing the book, it had not yet fully emerged. Digital humanities is now something which many departments of humanities, social sciences are engaged with. So most of the topics have been discussed in this book, and I'm glad to share my views on the relationship between literary theory and criticism, what is called literary criticism. If you look at the 20th century, the beginning of the 20th century, or the mid-20th century, it was predominantly dominated. It was dominated by what we call formalism and structuralism. As a reaction to some of the 19th century theories, which were history dominated and philology dominated. Of course, the traditions of philology and history remained alive in the field of literary studies. But the focus had now become the form of literary text, the form of work. In fact, Roland Barthes, the structuralist, wrote an essay called From Work to Text. So work was something which pre-20th century literary theory handled, the criticism handled, something called work. But now the emphasis on text and textuality became very prominent. A chief concern for the proponents of formalism, say Russian formalism, and also the structuralist endeavor, or more predominantly the critics who treated text as an autonomous form, as an autonomous kind of verbal texture. Okay, so the 20th century began with this kind of an approach in England as well as in America, in English studies, in literary studies. Literary studies I take as a larger field, which incorporates history of literature, theory of literature, criticism of literature, and many allied disciplines. So right now it will be digital humanities, which may attract attention. But early 20th century, the British tradition of literary criticism and literary studies in universities believed that criticism literary criticism has nothing much to do with literary theory. Perhaps the name to mention here is that of F.R. Lewis. He has a book called The Common Pursuit, in which he mentions that literary criticism has nothing to do with theory, quote unquote. According to him, it's a corrupting influence. You do get attracted to theoretical formulations, but they really offer nothing to literary theory, literary criticism. And by literary criticism, he meant studies of authors and their texts. Whether it's poetry, whether it's novels, the great tradition, etc., etc. Lewis wrote many, many books on criticism and on different genres and different books and authors. Now, this is a typical view that prevailed among many universities, among many circles in England. Even in America, in the early part of the 20th century, two separate traditions of study existed separately. People did not want to combine them. One tradition, as I mentioned, derives itself from the 19th century philological studies. In Marathi, we call it Vangmay Vidya. It's not even Sahitya Vidya. It is Vangmay Vidya. All kinds of texts, literary or otherwise, will be studied within their historical, linguistic, cultural contexts, not confined to literature. That is philology, the European tradition of philology. So philological studies, Vangmay Vidya, existed, and literature was a small part of it. Literature, reading of literary text was a small part of it. If you remember a name called René Vellec, a European scholar in the philological tradition, he wrote volumes on history of Western criticism. A terrific scholar who provided philological context to the emergence of literary criticism in Europe, comparing, contrasting, and so on. On the other side, in America, there was a group of new critics, new criticism, which were largely formalists, Cleanth Brooks and many of his associates, and one of them was Austin Warren, the American new critic. So they were practicing largely focusing on individual literary texts. They were not even looking at the author of the text per se, saying that the author and the author's intention has nothing to do with the form of a work of art. The author, later on, it came up as an essay in structuralism and post-structuralism as the death of the author. But the beginning of the death of the author is in the new critical principle of what they call the intentional fallacy. The intention of the author, Wordsworth's intention in writing Lucy poems, has nothing to do with the poems per se. So you can forget about all those autobiographical and biographical issues which emerge from biographical criticism. That is, we are not concerned with the intention. It's a fallacious kind of approach to literature, the intentional fallacy. So this was the atmosphere within which, in England and in America, the two major English-speaking countries in the world were conducting literary studies and literary research. Now, by mid-century, 20th century, an approach was emerging which is formulated by these two scholars I mentioned, from the European tradition, René Vellec, and from the American New Critical tradition, Austin Warren. They wanted to combine these two. They said it doesn't make sense to keep them separate. This was the issue in mid-20th century. The early 20th century had said that no, we don't want all this philological stuff, the history, intention, biography, all these are irrelevant to criticism per se. Literary criticism, that is, by that they meant interpretation and evaluation of specific individual works of art. The study of context was not really relevant according to them. But when the combined efforts of René Vellec and Austin Warren resulted in a book called Theory of Literature, these issues came up for discussion. What is the role of literary history in literary criticism? What is the relationship, and does history help or no? If it doesn't help literary criticism, why have a paper in your syllabus for historical studies of literature, etc.? So in 1948, the book was published a little earlier, but the edition which they expanded in 1948 and published was used all over the world for literary studies. It has been translated into 20 or 25 world languages. And my father, Professor H.G. Malshe, Sargam Malshe, was the one who translated it into Marathi. And it was published by Sahitya Sanskruti Mandal in 1982. I was witness to that. I was one of his sounding boards. He used to ask me, does this sound all right? Is this the, can I use this word, and so on. I mean, he was not taking permission from me, but he was just, I was being used as a sounding board. The opinions matter. And I was studying English literature. He was a professor of Marathi literature, Marathi language and Marathi literature. This year is his birth anniversary year. He was born in September 1921. So he was the one who translated. There was a Hindi translation of Theory of Literature available, but it was rather raw, not fully translated. We found passages which are difficult to translate missing from the translation. They have conveniently dropped those passages. So that kind of thing will not help unless you meticulously sit down and translate every bit. Otherwise, say that we have translated only selections from Theory of Literature. But my father sat down and did a detailed study of the text, and he was fascinated by this book. Of course, now it is an outdated book to a certain extent, but they discussed in depth various relationships of branches of literary study. I would again say literary study is the larger field. Within that, you have history of literature. Within that, you have literary theory. And within that, you have what they call practical criticism. Practical criticism is the name of a book by I.A. Richards, a British scholar who conducted many experiments on students at the college level and gave them texts which they were not familiar with and asked them to write without. And he found that people found it extremely difficult to write about a text unless they had information about the author, about the age, and so on and so forth. So practical criticism was the concern of that time. But theory of literature in mid-20th century raised issues of relationship between history and criticism, between philosophical theory and criticism, and also between history and philosophical theory. So theory is one direction, history is another direction, and criticism is the third direction. So literary studies, according to them, René Vellec and Austin Warren, consists of these three, and that got established in most universities teaching literature at that time. I studied literature in Elphinstone College in late 60s and early 70s in the university. I passed my MA in 1974, ancient man. Many of you were not even born at that time. So this was kind of model which we followed. Literature first, that is text first. Context later. Text and context. So historical context and theoretical context. They are all secondary. Criticism, practical criticism, writing about isolated texts, interpreting them and evaluating them gets the priority. Now, this was actually challenged by theory of literature. This autonomous, totally autonomous study of literary texts, individual literary texts, devoid of their context in history and in theory, was challenged by René Vellec and Austin Warren. And this is what appealed to us, to my father and to me, who were sort of translating. Of course, he translated, and I was only a helper in that. I was not a co-translator. But I watched the entire process of translation. And please remember that as bilinguals and multilinguals in India, we do need to translate texts from other languages to our languages. Other languages which may be originally Indian languages. And English is an Indian language now. So translating English into Marathi and Marathi into English is an extremely useful activity to our transplanting a text from one culture to another. And that gives you a lot of insight, because a translation is not meant for native speakers of English. A translation from English into Marathi is meant for Marathi readers, not for English readers, obviously. So you are going to make it relevant, make a text relevant. And without the study of context, this is just not possible. So as a core issue in translation studies, translatability, and for whom are we translating, why are we translating, these issues become important, and they are all relevant to the study of literature. Okay, many texts which are prescribed in English literature studies are non-English in their origin. Read Tolstoy, you read Pasternak, you read Camus, you read Kafka. They did not write in English. So these are, and also in a sense, Shakespeare did not write in 20th century English. In a sense, what we do about Shakespeare is to translate it into modern English and then study it. We don't transplant ourselves into the 16th or the 17th century as students of literature. We translate the text into modern English. And this becomes very clear when we start teaching and learning, for example. The language is quite inaccessible. The further we go into the history of English literature, the translations become, and we have to study Chaucer. We have to study Spenser. We have to study Shakespeare and Milton and Wordsworth, Shelley, Byron, Keats, and so on, and the Victorian poets and the early 20th century poets like Eliot and Auden and so on, the poets of the 30s and 50s and Dylan Thomas and so on. We did all that in late 60s and early 70s. Now, of course, things have changed. You have many options like Indian writing in English, Caribbean literature, and things of that kind. Okay, so Commonwealth literature, there are lots of options for studying literature as such. But this particular theoretical and historical and practical book called Theory of Literature by Welleck and Warren laid the foundation of modern literary studies as such. For them, history is important. It gives you the historical context, the sandarbha, the contextuality, the historical contextuality. Because literature is influenced by what is happening outside literature. Okay. On the other hand, they also brought in theory, philosophical theory. And for philosophical theory, it was the aesthetic principles which were discussed in philosophical theory, aesthetic theory. There were issues which we can call in Marathi Saundarya Shastriya issues. Aitihasik issues, the context, then Saundarya Shastra or aesthetics, issues from philosophical aesthetics, and literary criticism, the practical criticism, sometimes in Marathi it is called Rasagrahana, and so on, largely decontextualized. So this will not do, this separation will not do. An integrated model was suggested by theory of literature, and that became more and more pronounced as we come to the end of the 20th century and beginning of the 21st century. More of history, more of theory, and less of decontextualized practical criticism. Okay, so decontextualized study does not really exist, nor does it help, and so on. Even people who wrote, for example, Cleanth Brooks wrote many such studies for teaching, for pedagogical purposes, understanding poetry, understanding drama. He took separate individual examples of English literature and analyzed them, interpreted them, put questions to them only from a certain narrow perspective. Now, and understanding fiction, I think he wrote at least 3 books for pedagogical purposes, where teachers and students can use those for practical criticism. The New Critic, Cleanth Brooks, the American New Critic. These 3 books were very important for teachers, understanding poetry, understanding drama, and understanding fiction, because they focused on not the larger issue, but the narrowed down issues of textuality. the literary textuality of a text. Okay, so the Indian context was the Indian studies students were attracted to this integrative in theory of literature around 1950s, and in some of the Indian languages this book has been translated. And my father, Professor H.G. Malshe, Sargam Malshe, started a new movement in Marathi criticism called Sanshodhanatmak Samiksha. So that was very, very appealing to the newer literary critics. There is no study of literature without research, and there is no research without literary criticism. It's all an integrated kind of approach, even for modern texts, say Virginia Woolf, for or the later writers. You need a text which is based on sound historical principles, a text which is which has been correctly edited, not a text which has been haphazardly printed and brought to you as the text of Joyce or the text of Virginia Woolf or any other author. You need texts which have been, but in India, these norms are not followed very meticulously. Okay, so you get modern texts with all kinds of errors and so on and so forth. So you need to historically evaluate the text, even for modern texts, not only for Shakespeare and whether he meant this word or that word in a particular play, but also modern texts, which sometimes are not so meticulously printed. Now, let us turn to this one type of view, which I mentioned as the text itself, the autonomy of the text, the words, the lines, the phrases, the sentences, larger paragraphs and larger pieces of discourse in language. That is called the text. But the text, physical text, is actually called the work. And then the text which lends itself to interpretation, the work that lets itself to interpretation, further interpretation, many types of interpretation, the interpretability of the text is what is emphasized 1950s onwards. The text is not simply what is printed there. The text is the interpretability of that particular work. Yeah. So, and a larger model emerged because without the notion of creativity and without the notion of authorship, there is no textuality. There is an authorship, though people have argued that the author is dead, the death of the author. Foucault wrote something which has another significance. The essay as a kind of an answer to death of the author. He argued that author has a function. So author not as a person, but author as a structural function within the body of literary theory and literary criticism. So textuality has to be referred to authorship as such, not the personal life of the author as such, but what we would call authorship in the sense of author as a function, on the one hand. On the other hand, there's also the audience or the reader of text. The text does not stand by itself. The text is for consumption, it is for interpretation, it is for the reader to read. So the activity of creating a text and reading or receiving is a larger concept. The process of reception, just as there is a process of creation, there is a process of for creation. You don't need a specific historical author, as Ramayana would not have it. It is only attributed to certain rishis and munis. Even Natashas, the author is said to be Bharata. We don't know anything about Bharata. And yet we read, reconstruct Natashas as the ancient critical texts on aesthetic theory. We know much more about Aristotle, but that is not really relevant. Aristotle as the voice within the text is more important than Aristotle the person. Aristotle, who wrote many other books and so on. That's not what we mean by author as an agent, as a function. Okay, so you have text with its medium and with its peculiarities. And please remember, this problem exists not only in literature, but in all the arts. The musical text, for example, what does it mean to interpret a musical text? Is the musician important or no? And is the receiver of music, the listener, important or not important? So these processes have to be examined when we do criticism of music. You cannot simply concentrate on the simple tonal structures and rhythmic structures of a work of musical art. And the same is true of arts. True. It's an aesthetic, larger aesthetic problem. How do you visualize, or how do you visualize may not be the correct word. It will be the correct word for visual arts. So how do you conceptualize a text in different arts? Representational arts, non-representational arts, abstract arts, and so on and so forth. So it has pulls from both these directions, the direction of creativity, the process of creativity, and the process of reception. Both these become relevant, directly relevant to conceive of a text, to conceptualize what is a musical text, what is a visual text, what is the literary text. And here, both the history and the values, the aesthetic values, which are embedded in the text, become very, very relevant. And as I said a little earlier, when you translate explicitly, you realize the value of the contextuality, the historical contextuality, and the theoretical contextuality. For example, when Professor G.V. Karandikar, Vinda Karandikar, his name while he wrote poetry was Vinda Karandikar, while he translated great from Western culture, the first of them was Aristotle's Poetics. He translated that text from English because he did not know Greek. So it is translation of a translation, as Plato would say, twice removed or twice removed from reality. So this is Professor G.V. Karandikar, who wrote a long scholarly essay on poetics and why he translated it. He also translated Goethe's Faust, again not from original German, but from English version. And he also translated from English, but 16th, 17th century English, Shakespeare's King Lear, Raja Lear. So these extremely important classic world literature texts were translated by Karandikar, and the issues are numerous of textuality, how you can respond to poetics in Marathi when it gets translated. When the concepts of mimesis and the concept of catharsis get translated into Marathi, what do they mean in the field of literary theory, literary criticism, and literary history? What do they mean for a 20th century, 21st century reader of the translation of poetics? The same is true of a translation of Natashas, which is originally in classical Sanskrit, not Vedic Sanskrit, but classical Sanskrit. By the way, Natashastra is not a text which somebody wrote overnight or over a period of 1 year or so. Scholars have found that Natashastra, with its 37 adhyayas, 7,000 verses, is not a composition done by a single person. Could not have been. Is the result of a cultural authorship. Is the result of a joint authorship, not individuals, but a whole community. The Bharatas was a name of a community of performing artists and scholars of arts in that period. There was no single Bharata Muni. We have only attributed it to one single person called Bharata. There was no Bharata. Nobody has found out dates of Bharata. And the dates of composition range for almost 200 years. Okay, 400 years, in fact. 200 BC to 200 AD. Within that period, the Natya Shastra, as we know it in Sanskrit, was formulated. Newly formulated texts about theory. And it is about many other things also. But a formulation of a text, and it has been translated. Natya Shastra into Marathi, certain chapters have been translated. I don't think it is fully translated with 37 adhyayas. It is translated partly by Professor R.P. Kangle into Marathi, fully translated into English by Manmohan Ghosh in English. So these literary, aesthetic theory texts, when you translate them, you realize that it is not simply the text, but the context comes into play. Very strongly, you will realize you have to go to the context. The original context, so-called original context of Natya Shastra in classical times, and the context of modern times for translating Natya Shastra into Indian languages or world languages, whatever. Dilip Chitre's translation of Tukaram, a Marathi poet, into English. Obviously, he did not translate it for Marathi readers. He translated it for non-Marathi, maybe Western, maybe Indian readers. So obviously the context will come into being. You can't say, no, 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 I'll forget about the context and I'll read only Tukaram in English. That is not possible. You will have to take into account the historical context within which Dilip Chitre was functioning in the 20th century and the philosophical context within which Dilip Chitre hoped to convey something from Tukaram to a modern reader, a medieval author to a modern reader. That's a philosophical question, not simply a historical question. So bilingual, multilingual contexts cannot be forgotten, cannot be separated from textuality. It has to be taken, and the problems become extremely, what shall I say, prominent or severe. The problems of contextuality, historical and philosophical contextuality, become extremely important and have to be taken into account. Let us come to these two contexts of history and theory, and what is their bearing on textuality as such, the text. Please remember that history and historical context does not mean simply facts about change. Change is inevitable. Historical change goes on. There is a need to have a strong factual history, as the Greeks had it. What did actually happen? That is history. What actually happened? And what are the stages of that happening, actual things happening? Unlike the Indian notion of history, where a lot of mythology enters. We have, I think, our notion of history is already mythological narratives, not factual narratives. Because take, for example, the myths about the origins of Mahabharata, the origins of Ramayana, any classic. They are shrouded in mystery, and we attribute them to Vyas Muni and Valmiki, and there are notions of various kinds of notions, how Vyas wrote, who wrote, is it divine or non-divine? And there's a concept, for example, the Vedic texts, much before Ramayana and Mahabharata, and much before Natashas. The Vedic texts are supposed to be sacred and fallen from heaven in all cultures. Now, this is something which modern historian will not accept. They are attributed to gods. That's all. It's human beings who... So in a sense, we will accept Nietzsche's dictum that God is dead. That is, God is a construct. We construct gods. God, whether God exists or not, is an irrelevant question. We construct various kinds of gods. We construct authors as gods, or gods as authors. And we construct Vedas as divine text, Quran as a divine text, the Bible as a divine text, not as a... In Sanskrit, there is a word for it, apaurusheya, not written or composed by a purusha, a human being. Paurusheya as opposed to apaurusheya. That is another notion of textuality. The text is constructed, construed as divine. Now, texts don't fall from heaven. Gods don't write texts. Gods do not whisper into your ears that I have written this text. Of course, there are people who believe that gods whisper to them, but I think, again, modern secular historian will not accept this kind of mythology about the historical importance of Vedas or whatever texts we are reading and interpreting. So this kind of mythological history will have to be kept aside. For example, the moment you start talking about the Marathi Kavi Jnaneshwar, most people will think of रेड्याकडून वेद वदवले, रेड्याच्या तोंडून, or whatever, things like Jnaneshwarani भिंत चालवली, etc. So these are highly, I mean, this is magic. This is not facts. This is not things which is to be literally believed. Jnaneshwar didn't do anything of that kind. We'll have to assume that he didn't do anything of that. Of course, parents did, and so on. The children had to suffer social sanctions, social bahishkar, and so on and so forth. That, of course, will have to be kept in mind, but not रेड्याच्या तोंडून वेद वदवले and भिंत चालवली kind of mythology. Okay, so when you study Jnaneshwari or when you study Amrutanubhav, this kind of mythological history is of absolutely no help at all. We need factual history, and we need social, political, economic history of the times, not the mythological history. Of course, I'm not suggesting that factual history is something which is unproblematic, because factuality also needs a kind of interpretation, but that we will not go into. On the other hand, how is the philosophical discussion relevant to a text? How is theoretical? By philosophical, I mean theoretical. We are discussing literary theory and literary criticism. So how is that philosophical discussion? Philosophical discussion invariably involves values. Philosophy is first and foremost about values. They could be religious values, they could be secular values. In fact, in early 20th century, the name of the study of values, the field was called axiology. And there were two major parts of modern axiology: ethics and aesthetics. Ethics studied moral values, and aesthetics studied the so-called aesthetic values, that is, values which are important in the field of arts. Valuation, something is beautiful, something is not beautiful. Ethics, something is moral, something is immoral. Okay. And again, axiology also asks the question, what is the connection between ethical value and aesthetic value, and so on. So the field was called axiology. So from philosophy, we have to bring into literary criticism a sense of values. Texts. In fact, René Belleck and Austin Warren define a text or conceive of a literary text as largely what shall we call it? A text is a text about a set of norms. It offers you a set of norms. Every literary text offers you a set of norms. We'll see with a few examples how that happens. So we will treat text as an encapsulation of aesthetic norms or aesthetic values. On the one hand, there is the context of politics, history, and so on. On the other hand, there is the context of the study of values in philosophy, in theory. So theoretical and historical formulations do play a role in our conception of texts. The Natashas did not treat that, take that very seriously. Natashas concentrated theoretically on the notion of rasa, bhava and rasa. The bhavas are the raw emotions, but they get unrecognizably transformed into a work of art, into rasa. Rasa is a kind of aesthetic, exclusive aesthetic experience, unrelated to any other experience of the world. Bhavas are the emotions and so on of the world, the worldly ones. Of course, there are natya bhavas, but the laukika bhavas. The word for worldly is laukika. Rasa is alaukika. This is the concern of Natashastra. Largely, there are people who believe that rasa is not alaukika, it is laukika emotion only. Ramachandra and Gunachandra, the Sankhya philosophers, they believe that. But predominantly, right up to Abhinav Gupta in the 9th century AD, right from Natyashastra to Abhinav Bharati, Indian aesthetic theory has remained confined to a discussion of bhava and rasa, and a work of art as a transforming mechanism which converts the bhavas into rasa with the help of vibhava, anubhava, and vyabhichari. If you take the help of Sanskrit poetics, this is what the theory is about, a kind of transformation of laukika bhavas on the one hand, the raw emotions, worldly emotions, into a refined, alaukika, autonomous aesthetic experience, which is only comparable to Brahma Aswada. So Aswada of a work of art is comparable to Brahma Aswada of the Brahman. So when the Atman and the Brahman become one. So this is the kind of philosophy which they brought in. But they didn't bring in too much of history in Indian aesthetics. There isn't a sense of history, unlike in Aristotle and other texts in the West. So now, just to relate it to literature, which we study, the American literature, the British literature, European literature, and other traditions of literary creation that we study. Let us bring in a poem called Ars Poetica. So by mid 20th century American poet called Archibald MacLeish. The title itself refers back to Horace, Ars Poetica, the art of poetry. The art of poetry by Horace is about ethical values, instruction and delight in Horace. On the other hand, the modern Ars Poetica is about how a poem should not mean but be. So this entire emphasis on the being of a poem rather than the meaning of a poem will have to be into context. Meaning means the message, the political message, the moral message, the literary, the religious message, and so on and so forth. Various kinds of messages which authors want to communicate through their works of art. So a poem should not be read for its meaning of this kind, but should be. A poem should not mean, but be. This is the aesthetic of the mid-20th century, the autonomous aesthetic, the being of a poem, its existence in its form and structure, unique form and unique structure, and so on. However, on the other hand, there are also poets who suggest else. They suggest the context rather than simply the text. McLeish attracts attention to the text itself. A poem should not mean, but be, and this appeal to the being of a poem, the existence of a poem, is at the cost of the meaning of a poem. There is no stateable meaning, no paraphrasable meaning. Meaning as it is embedded in the being of a poem, that's all, not separable. So the whole concept of organic unity of a work of art and so on, non-separability of the message and the form. On the other hand, there are poets whose poetry can be read as something which does point to the irony behind all this. And I have Robert Frost in mind, The Road Not Taken. The last stanza, I shall be telling this with a sigh. Please remember, that sigh is very important. I shall be telling this with a sigh. What will I be telling? Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. That has made all the difference. Now, how do you really separate the meaning from the being of a poem? Here he's suggesting the irony, the road not taken, is something which he took because it was less traveled, and yet that has made all the difference. So this is not, there are many possibilities and equally attractive possibilities and viable possibilities, but the actual choice makes the difference. Finally, that is what it is. So don't forget the sigh with which Frost says he's going to say it. This sigh is fraught with irony. It's not a straightforward statement from Robert Frost. So there is also, if we go back to classical times, we have Aristotle's Poetics and Natashas, almost around the same time, composed around the same time, I'm saying. About Aristotle, we know factually the Poetics was composed around 335 BC. Natashas was composed between 200 BC and 200 AD, about 400. It's a huge compendium, as I said, compared to Poetics. Poetics is tidy. Probably one part of Poetics is lost, his discussion of comedy, as some of the scholars have been saying. This is largely a discussion of tragedy, as we know Aristotle's Poetics. But there are general issues also discussed at the beginning. So people have conjectured that Aristotle also wrote a theory of comedy, which we have permanently lost. It's not recoverable. Anyway, in general aesthetic terms, Aristotle raised this same issue, the relationship between poetry and history, poetry and philosophy. poetry and so the textuality and its political context, historical context, and the textuality and its philosophical value. So, and the most famous statement, one of the most famous statements in Poetics is poetry is more philosophical than history. More philosophical. But for him, history was chronicle. This happened and then that happened and then that happened. No logic to it. No probability principle functions through history. History is chronicling. It's a narrative, but this happened and then this happened and then this. This is not poetry. This is history for Aristotle. On the other hand, it's more philosophical because it gives you the artwork, gives you a sense of causality. This happened and therefore, put nicely by E.M. Foster, the king died and then the queen died is history. The king died and therefore the queen died is plot. Maybe it could be the other way around. The queen died and then the king died. The queen died and then the king died. Probably a new Foster will emerge. But again, contextuality of two kinds, the historical contextuality and the normative contextuality. There's a set of norms. Probability and necessity is a norm for Aristotle. That is the normativity. It's more philosophical. It's more connected with causality, the principle of causality. In Natashas, there is a single-minded pursuit of rasa, not contextuality of rasa. In fact, the context is kept out of the theoretical discussion of rasa because the nirvighna prati actually the context. Context would be the obstacles, that you are too much aware of your own context. Sthala and kala, they are the contexts. The time and the place within which you are actually located is a context. For rasa, it is a vighna. If you are too much aware that I am in NCPA watching a play and I will, how will I go back home after the play is over at 1 o'clock in the night? That is a vighna to rasa pratiti. This contextuality is to be kept out. If you want a rasa experience, experience of beauty of a play, you keep this out, and so on. So there are vighnas, rasa vighnas, which are to be avoided. Too much specificity is to be avoided, and the more generalizable the experience, the more of it moves towards rasa as a nirvighna pratik. So this is what the ancient Indian poetics of Natashas and the commentaries on Natashas largely have formulated. Unlike Aristotle, as the discussion of history on the one hand and philosophy on the other, is history on the one hand, the context of history, and the context of normativity, philosophical normativity on the other, is both of them play a role in the construction of the text. So this will be the largely an integrative approach, and I will end my talk with a little bit of indication of another poem by Robert Frost, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, a very, very famous poem, interpreted so many times in different ways But remember, all these metaphors of woods, snow, evening, the horse indicating the horse sense, the practical sense, the sense of the practical and the real world, for rasa vignas they will be, and the whole notion of ownership of the woods. Whose woods these are, I think I know. So whose indicates a kind of ownership and also a kind of infringement of the ownership, in the sense a trespass, a sense of trespass. And of course he is not here, his house is not in the woods, his house in the village. Whose woods these are, I think I know, and so on. The woods are lovely, dark and deep. But, please see the connective, but, not and, but, as a contrast, I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. I think the poem could have ended only with the line, and miles to go before I sleep. Why repeat that line? Because he didn't think of any other line? Please think for yourself. Why Frost repeats the line? And miles to go before I sleep. Miles to go before I sleep. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I must say that yours is a very comprehensive talk. Of course, the interpretability of a text within a work, theory and criticism. Paurushaya and Bhav Vishwa in literature is also very impressively presented by you. So we, the Maratha Vidya Prasarak Samaj and KTHM College, we express our gratitude towards your time, your efforts for bringing this very large topic, that is literary criticism and topic, with a very fantastic examples, very fantastic specimens, I must say. So now this is a time to go with the end of the session with the vote of thanks. I request Mr. Sanjay Rathod sir to propose vote of thanks of both the sessions.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Sanjay Rathod is here. I deem it a great honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks for this inaugural session of Faculty Development Program. I would like to express our deep gratitude to the Honorable Dr. V.B. Gaikwad sir, Principal, KTHM College, Nashik, for giving his valuable time from his busy schedule to grace the inaugural ceremony. Sir, you are the real source of inspiration for us in all our academic endeavors. I also would like to thank the keynote speaker, stalwart of today's session, Dr. Milind Malshe sir, for enlightening us with their knowledge. The session was full of knowledge and informative things. As Dr. Malshe sir discussed literary theory and criticism in general, was really informative and worthy to keep with us forever. I'm pretty sure the ideas and the knowledge that Dr. Malshe sir gave us will definitely prove fruitful in our academic journey. I also would like to thank Dr. N.D. Gaikwad sir, IQAC coordinator, and Dr. P.M. Nalawde sir, assistant coordinator of IQAC, for their kind support for the organization of this FDP. My heartfelt thanks, Professor Dr. Sharad Binnor sir and Dr. Tushar Patil sir, for their valuable contribution, guidance, and support in all our efforts. I owe special gratitude to organizing committee members, Dr. Yogesh sir, Pavanjay sir, Dr. Bharti ma'am, Kanchan ma'am, Sharuvi ma'am, and Sunita ma'am for their hard works to make this occasion a grand success. My special thanks to Darshan sir for his uninterrupted technical support, and special thanks to Ramdas Derle, our loving Mama, for his constant logistic support. Last but not the least, I thank you all participants for your cooperation for making this function a resounding success. Finally, I would like to leave you this inspiring quote by Martin Luther King. An individual has not started living until he rises above the confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. Once again, I thank you all for your presence and attention. Thank you. Dear participant, there is an announcement for tomorrow's session. Tomorrow's session will start sharp at 2 p.m. Please do attend in time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you once again. Thank you.